周一長談同大家深入時事話題。參議員報銷嘅弊案喺3個主角分別被停職停薪之後，睇起嚟喺新聞界上面度似乎係平息咗唔少，但係事實上呢個雪球一路係雪滾緊嘅。最近 RCMP 公布咗佢哋好多 email 嘅記錄都顯然顯示總理辦公室甚至總理對於成個案情嘅過程咧都牽涉甚深。更嚴重嘅咧係有證據顯示總理辦公室對於 Deloitte 佢哋呢個獨立嘅審計部門所做嘅調查過程同埋調查嘅結果都企圖要干預。呢兩個都係定時炸彈，甚至係不定時炸彈喺總理辦公室總理身邊嗰度。咁樣喺呢種狀況之下，對 Stephen Harper 對保守黨嚟講都係相當大嘅壓力。到底Stephen Harper 喺呢種狀況之下，佢何去何從？佢能唔能夠平安度過呢個危機呢？今日我哋非常高興，再一次請到 UBC 大學政治系教授，亦都係全國性嘅時事評論Dr. Maxwell Cameron. Thank you very much for coming back again. We really enjoy your comments. And so the RCMP's email records and the Deloitte and the PMO meddling with the Deloitte's report and process. What do you look into it?
It's an amazing report. You know, for years people have said that this is one of the most controlled, disciplined government that we've ever had. And the center of political control within this government is the Office of the Prime Minister, what's referred to as the PMO. This report opens up the PMO, and it gives us an inside glimpse into all of the workings inside the PMO. In particular, Nigel Wright, the Chief of Staff of the Prime Minister, who through much of the period in question was involved in a series of attempts to try to manage the whole issue of the senators' expense accounts and the inappropriate expenses that they were claiming. One senator in particular, Mike Duffy, is the center of most of Wright's attention. And that's because Mike Duffy didn't believe that he had incurred inappropriate expenses, and he didn't want people looking into the question of which was his primary residence, Ottawa or Prince Edward Island. He was concerned that that could lead him to being expelled from the Senate. And so he pushes back very hard, and there's an extensive negotiation between Nigel Wright and Duffy with lawyers involved on both sides. And at the end, in frustration, after having checked with whether the party could cover the expenses, Nigel Wright writes his own check. And the problem with this is, on the one hand, you know, what could be more generous than to have the Chief of Staff actually dig into his own pockets and spare the taxpayer expense of, to the tune of $90,000 to cover the expenses and the legal bills of Mr. Duffy. But the reality is it's an attempt to alter an ongoing investigation that was already underway in an audit within the Senate, and they had hired Deloitte to perform that audit. And so in that sense, it's an interference in the activities of an investigation within the Senate. And so it really gives us a sense of just how deeply the Prime Minister's office was in trying to control this whole issue.
But the key questions that most people still have is it's quite obvious that the Prime Minister's office is involved. But
That's right.
How much does the Prime Minister know? And when you review all these documents, do you think there's anything illegal going on, and what is the consequences if there is?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I don't think that the RCMP report in itself either implicates or exonerates the Prime Minister. There's actually very little in it that directly deals with the Prime Minister. There are occasional references. At one point, and I think probably most crucially, Nigel Wright says, before we make this final deal with Duffy's lawyers, I need to consult with the Prime Minister. And then he comes back and he says, we're a go from the Prime Minister's office. Now, what we don't know is when Wright consulted with the Prime Minister during that critical hour, did he mention to the Prime Minister that he was in fact going to take money from his own pocket to cover the senator's expenses and make it look as if the senator had paid his own expenses and thus was in no further need of an audit. That's not clear. And so one reading of this is There's nothing in the RCMP report that in fact proves that the Prime Minister knew anything was inappropriate, rather than anything inappropriate was done. On the other hand, it also demonstrates the degree to which a fairly substantial number of people within the Prime Minister's office were in fact involved. There were lawyers involved. There were top senators involved. There were key staffers, people responsible for communications and issue management, who were all involved in this whole process, in this whole attempt to manage this issue. And so either the Prime Minister knew, in which case he knew of wrongdoing within his own office, or he didn't, in which case the office was not within his control. And I think at a certain point, it's really no longer a question of was the Prime Minister involved in any illegal activity. I think the question really becomes rather the ethics of the office of the Prime Minister. That is, to what degree was the Prime Minister encouraging a kind of a culture within the Prime Minister's office that sort of said, make these issues go away, manage these issues, get it under control. I don't want to hear this sort of drip, drip, drip of daily allegations is causing agony for the government, so make it stop. And so the culture within the Prime Minister's office was to simply try as much as possible to control and cover up these issues. So it's really a matter of sort of his competence as a manager and the ethics of the people in the office around him.
So there is a difference between the inappropriate behavior and illegal, because right now there's no indictment, nothing that involved the legal process, but the inappropriateness and as you said, mentioned just now, the unethical, which is quite serious, the statement towards the MPOs.
To be clear, the RCMP is saying there are grounds for laying charges of breach of trust against Duffy and Wright. So there is a question of the legality of any deal that was concocted between the Chief of Staff and Mike Duffy. That is a legal question. Whether the Prime Minister is implicated in that question, that's another matter. We have yet to hear Nigel Wright speak under oath. And so ongoing legal investigations into Wright and Duffy could well tighten the noose around the Prime Minister's neck if indeed it turns out that he was involved in or knew of the attempt to undermine a Senate investigation into these inappropriate expense claims. But I think more broadly the question here is, what is the political damage to the Prime Minister's office? This is a Prime Minister who has committed himself to a different way of doing business, to a more ethical and indeed to a highly competent standard of management.
And yet he was extremely back to the kind of style that they were opposing in the first place.
Exactly. I mean, if you look back to when the Gomery report was unfolding, Harper criticized Paul Martin for not disclosing enough information, for not being transparent enough. And yet what we've seen from Harper is a stonewalling on this issue over a period of many months. He says again and again and again, I was clear, this was the responsibility only of Nigel Wright, he's resigned, and then he later changes the story to say he in fact fired him. The only Nigel Wright knew, and then a few people knew, and now it turns out that not only was it Nigel Wright and then a series of staffers and top brass within the Senate, but also the Tory fundraiser was involved in some way in these discussions. It's not a matter of just two people who were involved in this. It was much broader than that. And so I think that's right. It really then makes it look as if the Prime Minister is kind of calculated. I can ride this out. Ultimately, nobody cares.
Yes, my question is, it's obvious is that he is trying to storm the weather and hoping that by next election everyone will forget about it. Do you think he can do that? He is willing to do that? Because he is now, particularly I would like to repeat what he said at the Calgary's convention, is that he said once we make a decision, our opponents then immediately accuse us of being unfair, nasty, and ruthless, and portray the three offenders as victims or even martyrs. And in terms of those kind of language that he said, there's no base, and I haven't heard anyone, even the media, calling the three senators martyrs of. So. What is he doing now? For me, can I call it an act of desperation to hold on to the Conservatives' core party members?
Well, you know, to be sure, he's been quite unrepentant, even belligerent. His remarks in the Calgary Convention suggested that he doesn't care what the opposition thinks. He knows what's right and wrong. He's the only person who he has the highest standard. He is himself the gold standard of what's right and wrong in politics. And as far as he's concerned, he has managed this whole business in a matter which is you know, above objection. You know, these senators are themselves toxic politically. Nobody is defending the senators. The question that the opposition was raising was due process. And the reason that why they were raising the due process issue was their sense was the very hurried way in which these senators was removed bespoke a desire on the part of the Prime Minister to get this under the rug and get on with it and turn the page and move on to other issues. Now the question is, can he do that? I'm not sure he actually can do that. And that's what makes him increasingly look like a liability for the Conservative Party going forward.
This concludes the first half of our conversation. We will come back to the liability issue because I think that will change the political landscape. 周一長談，我哋一陣間同大家繼續傾。